Dr. Phil, hello again. Hello, hello. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing all right. Things are okay. Lack of sleep. Kids not
Children
sleeping,
related
but
or?
yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah, okay.
same as usual, but our poor little one's not very well today. So yeah,
Means
that's the
you won't be
reason.
very well tomorrow, probably.
No, give it 2 or 3 days.
2 or 3 days. Okay,
They,
okay.
they, it,
Well,
it tends to like drag out as long as possible. You know what I mean?
just when
So
you think you're safe, boom.
yeah, one illness, one household. Just move it around people over 4 weeks, and then you move on to the next one.
So this leads nicely into what we're going to discuss today, which is how you, as an academic, that therefore requires sort of quite traditional focus, where text on a page, information being digested by the brain rather than LLMs and things like that, is all a core part of the job and has been for a long time. The world has moved at pace, and I think for some of us, that sort of cognitive exertion has maybe been reduced a little bit due to assistance from elsewhere. I think I'm more distractible than I have been in the past. I think the amount of adult ADHD diagnoses that I'm seeing, potentially myself included, I just haven't bothered getting one done because I don't want to, be another person on LinkedIn with an adult ADHD diagnosis talking about it and extracting a lesson on B2B sales from it. But I would love to hear from you, especially once children have been thrown into the mix, which they have been, how you manage to maintain focus from a habits point of view, how you allocate that to training, and how the listeners at home, the wonderful listeners at home, can apply that to their own world. So how to become less distractible in the modern world. Do you think distractibility or indistractability is a skill that can be trained?
Yes. Reason being, I'm seeing it from like a skills perspective if I'm an S&C coach, because one of the things that you can manipulate is your environment. Like as an S&C coach, if I'm trying to coach skills, I feel like I'm a bit more hands-off and I want them to figure out these skills themselves, use the context of the environment, how things feel, the stimuli around them to try and figure out the best way of moving for them. And I think when it comes to habits, you kind of have to do a similar approach. You've got to find your way through it. You've got to manipulate your environment. You've got to move things around. And I think that's how you're going to train your distractibility. It's not like you need to do this to get less distracted. It's no, let's try and change your environment so that, and also do things in a way that you enjoy, particularly if it's an area of passion. And that's what's going to, all of a sudden, you end up, I don't know, they call it the flow state. I know there's quite a lot of research on it. I think it's overused, particularly by some people on social media. But certainly you get into that state where all of a sudden you don't realize you're not being distracted.
Yeah.
And the work just comes and things just start flowing. So that sounds really cliche, but I think that's the best way. So I'm a big advocate for manipulating your environment. And another reason why I'm an advocate for that is because I see it myself when I get it wrong. And
Yep.
I'm distracted all the time. In fact, my phone is right by me right now. And
Chuck out
it's
the
a
window,
terrible
Phil,
place.
dramatically, please. Thank you. And we'll use that as the hook for this podcast. Thank you. No, I agree entirely. And I think keen to have this discussion today because your line of work and career has been much more, it has a more inbuilt requirement for deep work than other industries does. I think it's probably fair to say. Maybe that's wrong. But I think essentially you need to go into a sort of studious mode and you cannot absorb information cognitively unless you are focused. I think that's the key from my end. You can still get tasks done in a different work setting, even if they're half-arsed, they can be ticked off. Whereas in your setting, you cannot absorb and digest and process information unless it has been processed by your brain. And if your brain is focusing on something else, it will not allow that absorption. So that's why I'm keen to have this discussion with you today, because at the end of the day, the less distracted you are, the more you can be compliant with your training, the easier you can get towards your goals, the less time it takes up, the easier it is to execute, and therefore the more time you have available for the things that you're potentially sacrificing by pursuing the training goal in the first place. So why don't we go back and forth a little bit on the things that have had the biggest impact on our ability to be less distracted. My number one is an easy change that has made a world of difference and has been something that I've really tried to force implementation on with everyone that can with athletes at Omnia over the years, which is the phone is not allowed in your bedroom. And by that I mean no doom scrolling in bed before you sleep. The alarm is outside of the room, or at the very least on the other side of the room. Having a phone within touching distance of where you sleep is going to disrupt and remove, it's going to increase the accessibility of distraction before sleep. And that is a cycle that can then perpetuate. You become more tired. You then desire the doom scrolling, cognitive decompression a little bit more. And then before you know it, you're wasting an hour and a half before you go to sleep, doom scrolling TikTok and wondering why you're so wide awake before you don't sleep for very long before you tackle the next day. So for me, that's a big one. Obviously, if you've got a child sleeping on the other side of the corridor, then you can't have an alarm in the corridor. Yes, caveats are going to come flying in here, but I think try and minimize device interaction around bedtime and wake time and take accountability for how accessible you make that for yourself. That's a big one for me. So I sleep with the alarm. I sleep with my alarm outside of the room, and I know whenever I'm in a hotel, whenever I'm staying at someone else's house and I have the charger next to the bed, and I have it in bed available before bed, even if I know that I don't normally sit on it before I go to sleep, because it's there, I probably will. And that is therefore making my distractibility higher, because I'm doom scrolling, then sleeping, rather than just sleeping. And the knock-on effect of that can then compound over time, impacting training the next day, work the next day, whatever it may be. So that's a big one for me.
No, I'm with you there. Particularly as I can't actually follow that. We have our baby monitors on our phone. So they're literally playing on our phone by, less than a metre away from my head, so I can hear it if they do cry. So it's not like you can set it up so that if your child makes a noise, it then sends an alert. Sounds like a little bird tweeting. But we actually have it running on our phones all night while it's plugged in.
Do you think, in the context of the discussion, you would actually prefer a slightly more traditional, less modernized version of that? Would a more traditional baby monitor separated from a phone be a delineation that actually might help in this situation? Because, for example, I think I've taken it off recently because things are so chaotic. I didn't want additional data inputs dealing with my chaotic mind. But for years, I've woken myself up with a haptic alarm on a Whoop. And that meant that I wasn't even looking at my phone. I was not making my phone my alarm anymore. So it was kind of a manual alarm clock. Would there be merit for you in your situation having a manual baby monitor to separate from the phone? Because you never know. You might check the baby monitor in the middle of the night and then you see a notification. And then before you know it, you're reading an email. And then your brain's thinking about the email. And then before you know it, you're struggling to get back to sleep and you want to answer the email. So what's your interaction with that like?
I mean, that would be really cool if you did have a separate, mini phone, but all it could have on it was the baby monitor, which some baby monitors offer. The really handy thing with the one that we have is that I can actually check the baby monitor wherever. So I might be up at the university in London and I can still see when my kids are sleeping. They give you a report, everything. So I really like it, but I understand that because it's linked to my phone, there's some, it can be there. I think I am better at not checking my phone for emails or anything like that in the middle of the night, purely because I am so exhausted. And it's almost like a race to get back to sleep because I don't know when I might wake up. Some nights are better than others, but in that sense it doesn't. But having it around in the evening, certainly. Because, I always find that I might be doing something, I'm getting my lunch ready for the next day, or I'm doing this and that, just general admin tasks, and all of a sudden I'm checking my phone while I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And that's what slows you down. So admin tasks which could take half an hour, take 45 minutes to an hour, and you wonder where the time goes, I haven't got enough time to do this, I wish I could do this, but I haven't got enough time. And you're like, well, if you got rid of that at key points of the day, you might do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it really does add
separate
up.
baby monitor would be cool. It does, yeah.
Yeah, I think separate alarm clock is a good solution if you can't have your phone as your alarm clock outside of the room. So anyone using that quote-unquote excuse, there are alternatives.
I have a Lumi. Have you heard one of those?
I have. I have not actually. I've had one in my basket several times, but never actually purchased it. Is it worth the buy?
Wife got me one for my birthday a while back, and the use obviously the gradual light to make it look like a sunrise, and it's an alarm that's separate to your phone, 100%. And then she's got one, so we got one on either side of the bed. It works well. It does.
Okay, nice.
It's about £100, but it's probably one of the few things that I'm like, yeah, that's definitely been worth.
Yeah,
cash.
it was at a price point where it wasn't sort of cool, right, click, buy, done. It would kind of made me hesitate before clicking checkout. So I don't actually know why I didn't click checkout in the end. Maybe I just got distracted. Ironically, who knows? But I will invest in one of them, I think, because I was staying somewhere recently that had full on blackout blinds, and I actually found when my alarm was going off, even though it's nice to feel like your alarm's fully woken you up rather than waking up before your alarm in some ways, because you've maximised the time available in terms of sleep, I did feel a little bit disoriented at a time in the morning that I'd normally feel a little bit more oriented, because it was still pitch black in the room aside from the phone. So again, something to consider is, I think, in that setting, blackout blinds plus Illumi would be a great combination. Anyway, sleep is important. We all know that. So do anything you can to minimise distractibility around sleep in the evening and in the morning, I think is good. Because, I do everything I can to avoid notifications that can derail anything that I'm doing at that time. And the amount of times that I've woken up and had plans for the day that, I don't know, I've seen an email that's made me start thinking about something, and then before I know it, I'm thinking about it during my training. My training's a little bit unfocused, and it takes a little bit longer because I'm trying to do things in between sets. And I think removing access to information is a positive thing, and that is why you have a nice tartan chair behind you, isn't it?
Yeah, no phones are allowed, or screens are allowed around there. I have I don't know where it's gone. I have a notepad where I try and use it as I kind of call it as recentering. I don't really like the name journaling, maybe just because journaling always seems to be associated with dear diary, today I did this. No, it's nothing like that. And normally it's just me just writing whatever I feel, ideas, all of that type of thing, and sometimes getting it out on paper is really helpful. And even I read something today, actually. It was saying that typing doesn't create the same brain activity as writing does, and achieving goals that have been written down by hand happen more than if you've typed them. So
that doesn't surprise me at all, based on my relationship with those two things.
Because I used to write a lot of things on Notion. I really like Notion for keeping organised and everything. But when it comes to sort of, I guess, getting ideas, creativity, all of that stuff down, I've tried to move away from it because for those reasons.
I'm the exact same. So YouTube planning for me is all done in Notion, but I do it on paper first, and then basically the paper is the cognitive strain, and then the formalization of that is inputting that into Notion, and other people have visibility on that too. So that's kind of the process that's worked best for me. But if I was just using Notion, I find I don't know what the word is. It's like I just feel very overwhelmed by digital inputs these days, whereby simple tasks that are done digitally I find much more difficult if I'm fatigued or have done too many of them that day than doing a physical task. Maybe this is just, the digital overwhelm's got to a point of no return. But I think my ability to stay focused on a task is best executed when I've had less digital input that day, which is interesting. I try and pay attention to this, but unfortunately, we are speaking virtually and doing a virtual podcast recording, which means I'm staring at a screen. I prepared for it on my phone. I sent you the messages ahead of time on my phone. My laptop's immediately to the right of me with Notion all loaded, and this is just the way that we operate. These are the systems at play. But I think the key detail is having some hard and fast rules, like your chair, like my alarm clock, that help you determine what are the things that are pulling you away from the things that you're trying to do, that the little supercomputer in your pocket is taking you away from. And it doesn't just need to be that. It can be other things too, like in a training setting, how do you audit your priorities so that maybe there's a few things in your week that don't serve the primary goal and actually maybe don't serve you in the way that they once did, but you keep doing them because you always did, for example. That could be social interactions, I don't know, family commitments that could maybe be restructured. There's lots of ways of approaching this. Everybody's circumstances are different, but I think not just going through the motions is a great way to audit how you allocate your attention, because it is a finite resource. So did you, in the process of your academic journey from undergrad, master's, PhD, were you ever taught the art of studying and deep work, quote unquote, or achieving flow state or focus? Was it something that was a part of the curriculum to get the best out of you as an academic, or was it entirely self-learned through doing?
No, I think it's all self-learned, but again, I think supervisor style and interaction with the topic area, I think, is what created it. So I'll go back a bit. When I was at school, I was like very much a B student, and I couldn't figure out why. Everything, even when I put loads of effort into something might have been a bit more last minute, come away with a B. It's like, well, why is that happening? And I just realized that I was memorizing everything rather than actually learning it. So when it came to a question which required a little bit more around the area, I just couldn't do it because I couldn't. It's almost like, I haven't memorized the answer. And I really came across that once at university level. And when I realized, like, I can read around this, and I'm getting all these sources and bringing that information together. And then when you get that information like that, you can't really just memorize stuff, because you start to realize there's no right or wrong. Like if you're learning out of a textbook, there's gray areas which you have to have an opinion developed on. So I really developed in that way because I started experiencing how to get information in different ways. I started reading loads and reading different types of literature and all sorts, not necessarily some that I found really interesting, but because the different mediums of communication, and that was improving my ability to explain what I wanted to explain and absorb information in different ways. So that's where kind of like a love of reading has come from. And I had a PhD supervisor that wouldn't always respond when I had an initial question. He would let me try, and by the time that I've actually figured it out myself, he then replies. And then I feel like I've actually learnt a lot more because I've had time to go away and figure it out. So there's quite a lot of different things where the realization of how I was learning was wrong. Going out and finding different information in different ways. And by doing that, I was just forced to find my way of learning. So I've never really thought of myself as really intelligent, but I can learn really well. And that's because I've just figured out my way. And people generally do figure that out, but they do it at different times. So you get someone that was really bad at A level, but then they get to university level. They found their passion, found their ability to learn, and all of a sudden, 5-6 years later, they've got a PhD. That you can't always predict exactly that person got straight A's at A level. They're going to definitely excel. They might do, but they also might not. And I feel like, everyone finds their own journey. Sometimes people figure it out in different ways. Sometimes people are still learning it. So, I think I've had an environment. I've been very lucky to have an environment where I've figured out how I can learn.
But a lot of that was building the wings as you fly and creating an environment that forced you to strain. And I think if we keep going back to this, I think the main point of today is go looking for cognitive strain in the same way that you would physical strain, but also be honest and accountable about where you're maybe leaking a bit of time with distraction. Because the past 6 weeks or so, I've been in this weird cycle of checking a series of different things on a regular basis when it mattered. And then in the process of checking them whilst it was relevant, it became a habit very quickly that I kind of still do, even though it doesn't matter as much. So like you've said, I find myself midway through something and all of a sudden I'm checking Stripe. I'm like, you don't need to do that. You get sent a report at the end of every week that you can skim over. Why are you doing that? And it's little things like that made me go, okay, interesting. There's things that you're doing here that are leaking focus, that are therefore taking you away from the primary tasks that are pretty strictly allocated as it is. So I think that's the key in a training setting is more often than not there is time available in the modern world that we are maybe leaking, that by honing in and being accountable to where we think we're leaking it, you can maybe create a little bit more training time, or more importantly, get a little bit more personal or family time back by doing the same things that you're already doing and doing them better. Because I think the risk in the modern world is that by trying to do so many different things at once with so many digital inputs and so many sort of spinning plates that you've got accessible to you at all times, you can end up not half-arsing, but reducing the focus of the input into the thing that you are doing there and then. And that is going to reduce the efficiency of the output and the effectiveness of the output. Like, let's say, being on your phone between sets in the gym. A lot of people use, we use Training Peaks to track training. But if you find yourself opening Training Peaks, putting in, I did a set of 8 at RP7, and then you're on Instagram, and you've lost 3 minutes rather than 90 seconds for your rest period, and then you add that up over the sessions throughout the week, that might end up to be 37 minutes. Who knows? Arbitrary numbers. But those 37 minutes could be a dog walk and a coffee with your wife and dogs on Sunday morning, whatever it might be, for example. And I think somewhat trivial example, but actually in some ways quite practical, is if you can claw back some minutes here or there, it will reduce the pressure of getting things done and sort of reduce that pace at which I feel we have to operate at all times in the modern world. And I do think digital inputs are a big part of that. So academically speaking, I know you mentioned in yesterday's podcast, I can't remember which one it was, but obviously anyone listening's listened to all previous episodes, so they'll know as well as we do, of course, and they'll hit subscribe at this point if they haven't already. You were talking about there's research being conducted on the impacts of social media on professional sport or something to that effect, which was, it's essentially illustrating that there is now a direct correlation between the digital distraction that holds us sort of prisoner in many ways, but that being an essential component of doing the thing in the first place. So it's all about healthy habits and hygiene with these things rather than the things being good or bad inherently.
Yeah, to go back to your point, actually, you said the example you gave where you just checked Stripe.
Yep.
And I wonder if, like, you business, me academia, I guess, we're quite driven people. And I find that sometimes when I check my phone, whether it be Instagram, if I'm like, I go into it thinking, what's been said today, what's covering this area, that type of thing. It's almost like giving me the illusion that I'm working. Yeah. I'm working towards, look at me, I'm being productive, I'm checking this because it's giving me information I need to work towards my goals. But really, it's just actually taking me away from that. And it's that illusion of work that you go into just checking your phone, and then by the time you finish doom scrolling, you feel awful because you've realised actually that didn't contribute anything apart from making me a bit more miserable. But it's still there. I feel it gives that illusion of work, especially to those that are highly driven, very productive people.
I agree, and I think I found myself doing it this morning where I was watching one of Max Tuning's videos, who is a YouTuber that I used to watch when I was at school, to bring in my own school anecdote. Nice try, Phil, getting one in without me swinging right back at you. Last 2 years at school, I discovered him. Very small YouTube channel. He was a very strong deadlifter for the size that he was, and I kind of have watched his journey over the years from college lifting, undergrad to business exit, living in Texas with wife, children, dogs, all these things. And with my breakfast this morning, I think I'm going to watch a YouTube video just to see how other YouTube content creators are presenting a certain style of video at the moment. People that have been doing this a long time, let's get some sort of creative inspiration from how people are doing things, compare it to how my structure is and sort of process information. But then I realised I've sat for 20 minutes watching YouTube with my breakfast when, realistically, would I have been better just not having any digital input and having a moment to enjoy my breakfast and move on? I can disguise that as research or creative thought, but I could also disguise it as just killing time and sort of a dead zone. So it's little things like that, but I think the key detail is once you sort of stimulate your brain in that way, that can then set a bit of a foundation for what the rest of the day is going to look like. And I think that's where, for me, one of the most effective ways to keep on top of this is highlighting for me as an individual, when do I do certain tasks best during the day? And I'm sure you've probably got experience with this in terms of cognitive strain in an academic setting. I know I am probably most switched on to the task at hand first thing in the morning, when it's quiet, when it's not chaotic, when I haven't had to engage in too many things already. And the difficulty I've always got is that a work task or is that training? And that's a sort of dichotomy I constantly go back and forth on. The afternoon, I'll be a little bit more over the place, a little bit more ideas driven, and that's where meetings and thoughts should probably happen. But if I have meetings and thoughts in the morning and I then do my training in the afternoon, the training always feels harder to get to. I feel like it takes longer and there's all these little things. So I think trying to curate your schedule and your outputs as best you can around when you feel best doing them is a great way to get some time back as well. And lean into what works best for you so that you are less available to be distracted. And annoyingly for me recently, a new thing that's developed is I'm finding that when I get to the end of big double or triple training days, I have my dinner and then I get this sort of creative surge, whereas previously I'd normally just be wiped out about 8 p.m. and that was me. Whereas I'm finding myself thinking at 8 p.m. and there was a night 2 weeks ago where I just ended up scripting something until 1 in the morning, which is very unlike me. I'm normally asleep by 10. But I began the process and I thought, wow, I'm in a really good creative headspace here. But it's almost 10 p.m. You should probably cut this off. But I'm like, but you haven't felt this focused in on something creatively for quite a while, so maybe you should lean into it. But by leaning into it, you're going to go to bed later and you're going to pay the price for that for sleep tomorrow. And then it was this kind of argument I had in my head over which is the one that I should lean into for what outcome. So I tried to learn from that in terms of, okay, if that happens, how do I approach it? What are the rules I will place around this based on what I know is best? And just keep learning from it. But I think, it is difficult. But to circle back to the relevance for Omnia, I think finding what time of the day works best for you, what environments work best for you to make getting the training done as easy as possible is a big part of the planning process. And that can be things down to what gym do you do certain sessions in. For example, if I've got heavy SBD work, a powerlifting gym will make it much more enjoyable and I'll get through it quicker and with more intensity because I'm in the sort of right environment. If I'm waiting 15 minutes for a leg extension at Nuffield Health, then I'm not going to enjoy it as much. I'll probably be more distractible during the session. I won't feel it was as high quality. I'll get home a little bit later and a little bit lackluster because I haven't had a great session. There's all these little things that you can manipulate, and obviously it comes with a bit of planning and a bit of thought and a bit of variety. But I think, what do you think you've learned from your academic journey that can be applied to your day-to-day habits, structuring in a family setting?
Family setting.
Not necessarily family, but your current your family is a current part of your huge existence, but so is your ongoing research and that sort of thing. So your day to day, how is your academic attention to detail and focus supported your outputs currently?
There's probably two key things I would recommend here, and one of them is because it kind of touches on what you discussed. So you said you've got this huge surge of creativity that evening and started scripting something till 1 in the morning. Now, I used to be really rigid, routine. I was very keen for routine. Because I felt that made me more efficient. And then the more and more I got into writing, research, ideas, the more I realised that I'm not going to sit down and go, right, ideas come to me. Like, they come whenever. It could be on a walk, in the shower, it could be whatever it might be. It could be 8 p.m. in the evening after you've done a triple session day. And I'm just like, I could have gone, if that was me, I could have gone, I'm pretty tired, but I need my rest because sleep is important, which it is. I'm not saying it's not. But I know if I tried to revisit that the next day, that idea's gone.
Exactly.
And if that creativity is the key thing for what I need to do, for you, I guess, more business, for me, for more writing, academia, then I would lean into it. The idea around everything is like super rigid in terms of routine, I think can be quite limiting. They talk about being anti-fragile. You need to be able to be adaptable to certain things, and when creativity strikes should be one of them, especially if it's such a key component of what it is you do. So, if you asked me that question like 8 years ago, I probably would have gone, no, I would have stuck to my routine, it would come again, and I would have got to sleep. Now, and maybe it's because I don't get as much sleep now, but I think it is just because I realise how special creativity is, and I think it's stupid to think that you can just manufacture it like that. You can't always fully. Yeah, you can't white knuckle it. So
Yeah.
The other thing, which may feel a little bit the opposite, was everyone's familiar about being you've got to be comfortable feeling uncomfortable during training, right? But that's a really good mantra to follow for all aspects. Now, the reason why I particularly like that, because it really helped me improve my writing. So in the past, I would write something, I want to like change it, or I want to change it like that, or what should I write next, All of a sudden, it's got 2 hours have passed and I've written a few sentences. Like, are they amazing? Maybe, but I've only written a few sentences. Whereas now, I would schedule in, 45 minutes or whatever it might be, and I want to just write. Is it good? Is it bad? Don't care. Just get it on paper. Number one, you always realise that it's better than you originally thought. 2, you can always, and I think you're always better, go back and make changes. And you start to create something from something you've already got on paper. Getting it down first is the hardest thing. Just like it is for training, when you're feeling tired and you don't particularly want to do it, things can be quite difficult. Sometimes, you've just got to be comfortable feeling uncomfortable. It's the same when trying to create something in terms of writing. Just get stuff down and you revisit it with drafts and drafts, rather than trying to curate the perfect sentence every time. It doesn't work like that. Even to the point where if I have to find a reference, I'm like, well, I know that's a reference. I've read it somewhere. Okay, right, put some brackets there. Move on. I'll find the reference later, because going to find what reference it is loses my train of thought.
If you then go, okay, I'm going to find that now, open up the laptop, right, here we go, then I think that's exactly what Johan Hari wrote about in his book, Stolen Focus. I think, I don't know the exact stat, but I think it was on average, corporate workers in America spend 7, or was it 4? I think it might have been 4 minutes of uninterrupted time to any one task as a maximum. That is the average sort of max that people work to on tasks in the modern world, because they've got somebody sending them a Teams message, they've got someone knocking on their shoulder, they've got someone giving them a call, they've got someone asking them to pick up something in a different project, whatever it might be, and there's never actually any time created to just do the thing. Whereas, that reference example is great, is if you thought, I should probably get that, open it, fine, it was this person at Al, there you go, 2021, done. Where was I? What was I talking about again?
That's exactly it.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And
you think that's part of the writing process, but actually it's just distracting you from the writing process.
Yeah.
I
think the most relevant example in a training setting for this is people that agonize over and over again about the perfect training plan or the most perfect structure for a week-by-week basis. They agonize over every little granular detail, getting it right, getting it perfect, basing it in line with the research and sort of the advice that we give, whatever it might be, and then tearing it all up when something gets in the way that makes it a bump in the road. When I think the skill that's to be developed is actually understanding where the push and where the pull is, and when to lean into gung-ho, let's ignore the references, to when do you go, okay, I should probably find this reference now. It's just these little things that come through, again, as with all things, exposure and experience times the passage of time. I think that's kind of the way that I view it, is exposure and experience plus time equals refined skills. That's kind of the output that we're looking for here. So I think if you are juggling a lot of things and you're trying to get high training output alongside work, family, whatever it might be, just have a look at where you are leaking time, because it will more than likely be in more areas than you think, and then design some habits and some structures around that to mitigate that leakage, which might be leaving your phone in a different room, which might be getting a mechanical version of something you use your phone for. It might be saying between the hours of 9 and 10 as a entrepreneur, you are unavailable to the team. It might be from 3 till 5 is when you take meetings. It might be once you tuck the kids in at bed at 8 p.m., that's when you sit down with a book, a glass of wine, and a notepad and see what happens. It's all of these little things that you can audit and assess and try to get the best out of what works for you with what you are aiming to achieve. And that looks different for all of us. But I think I agree with you, actually. The process for me training recently has made me more aware that rigidity to a routine that I know serves me doesn't work if there's lots of inputs that I can't control. So I've had to get a lot more comfortable adjusting the intention of the routine to real time as it's unfolded, and become more comfortable with doing things a little bit later, doing things a little bit earlier, missing the odd thing here, amalgamating the odd thing there, being a little bit behind on certain things just for the sake of what is the overall priority and the intention. And that's been a very valuable process for me, because I'd say the first 6 weeks of this training prep for me was a bit, I was getting really frustrated with how I said I'd do a certain thing at a certain time, and then all of a sudden I'm doing something else at that time, even though that needed done. But I'm not doing my training at the time I said I was going to do it, so now everything's falling apart. You're making mistakes, when in reality I'm just doing what had to be done in front of me at the time it needed to be done. So it's been useful. But again, like you said, I've been uncomfortable, and I've become more comfortable whilst basking in that discomfort and allowed some time to pass, and I feel better about it. So there we are. We have that in common, Phil. We are rigidity and routine driven, but with some wiggle room, I'd say.
Yeah, and it's not like the wiggle room is going to derail everything. The wiggle room ends up allowing us to be stronger.
Yeah, it creates a better output. And look, this is that as a concept is applicable to everyone's situation. I firmly believe that, whether it's 9 to 5 or whether it's completely made up hours that you decide when, wake up at 3 a.m, I feel creative, I'm going to go. Whatever it might be, whatever you do, there are things that you can control and manipulate to elicit the best output by reducing the inputs that can distract you. And it's difficult and it takes practice, because a lot of these habits are quite well formed and iterated upon, like doom scrolling. Your phone is right there all the time and is kind of the center of all of our universe these days, which is upsetting sometimes, especially every time you go somewhere and it's like, just download our app quickly and then you can do this transaction. And you're like, I don't want to download fucking Hertz Iceland's app. And I don't have Wi-Fi or signal at the moment. How's this going to work? Oh, well, we actually can't complete the transaction until this is done. And then I find myself getting really angry at the modern world and think, am I that grumbly old man that I judged as a teenager now? And maybe I am. Maybe I am.
Shouting at clouds.
Shouting at clouds. Shouting at the cloud, actually. Anyway, that is an overview on how we believe you can be less distractible, and more importantly, why you should be less distractible if you're trying to make the most of your training goals amidst day-to-day life, which I believe we all are. If not, why have you made it 30-something minutes into this podcast? I can't actually read the smaller digit there. If you have, thank you, but I don't know why you've listened this far if you're not trying to make your training goals work alongside day-to-day life. Thank you very much for listening. See you next time.